Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We have returned after about a week off the NBA Finals. We are old news, and the NBA draft was last night. I was preparing for it by being in Los Angeles for a week, doing my due diligence on all the prospects. Vigorously taking notes, Sap.
Mhm.
And we have a official draft in the books now to break down. But we also that wasn't enough for the NBA, Sap, as a big trade happened yesterday with Russell Westbrook heading to the Lakers. We will be talking all about that and what it means for Sap's favorite team in the NBA and favorite player. But let's start with the draft, Sap, since we weren't expecting a Westbrook trade yesterday. Let's start with what we were expecting, which was a draft to happen, and indeed go down. This, strangely enough, Sap, this seemed like the least hyped draft I can really remember, even though the talent level was really good.
Yeah, everybody's saying this is the best draft since 2003. The three best drafts in NBA history, or at least in recent NBA history, would be 84, that was Jordan, Olajuwon, Barkley, and Stockton. 96, when you had, of course, Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Steve Nash, all Hall of Fame caliber players. 2003 with LeBron, Bosh, Wade, and Melo. And now people are talking about last night's draft is going to measure up pretty favorably to those three other drafts. I think the coverage on ESPN was almost laughable at some point. Look, I love Kendrick Perkins and I like Jay Billis a lot, but every player was fantastic. I mean, Kendrick Perkins had Cade Cunningham as the best player to come into the draft, the most well-rounded player to come into the draft since LeBron James 18 years ago. Apparently, according to Kendrick Perkins, again, who I absolutely love, Evan Mobley, who was the third pick by the Cleveland Cavaliers out of USC, is going to be Bill Russell. And I think Reese Davis, who was hosting the ESPN show, said, well, all he's got to do is win 11 rings in 13 years and he can be Bill Russell. And Jay Billis loves every player, especially anybody from Duke. And if I hear one more time that they're long, the players are long, most basketball players are long. The exception of Damon Stoudemire, who played for Portland and Toronto, who's kind of a short arm, stubby guy. Most basketball players are long. They play basketball not just because they're tall, but because they're also long. So I thought their coverage was just laughable. I mean, where was ESPN's version of Mel Kiper to maybe attack some teams for reaching a little bit too high to draft someone or
Yeah, they don't
bypassing
have that.
someone who was better? They don't have that. Every player was great. 64 players, all great, all going to make it in the NBA. Cade Cunningham is LeBron James. Evan Mobley is Bill Russell, and whatever. It's going to be the best draft since 2003. It was a bit much. They do need someone in there that says, "Hold on one second. Why the hell did the Toronto Raptors take Scotty Barnes instead of Jalen Suggs and get into that?" But they just kind of you know, brushed over that and went on to the next pick.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I mean, this isn't a new thing with the NBA draft. This is sort of every year. Every player is great. I mean, we remember even when Bill Simmons was on the coverage, he was fist pumping when the Celtics drafted James Young.
Right.
And we all know how that went. Actually, probably most people don't know how that went. That's how quick he was in and out of the NBA. But yeah, I mean, I think the talent level was really good in this draft set. Maybe it's because the Celtics didn't have a pick in the first round, but it just didn't seem like it was a very buzzed about NBA draft. And I think Cade Cunningham is excellent. I think a lot of these players are going to be excellent, but
Hmm.
I don't know. It just didn't seem like there was that much excitement about it. Maybe because the season literally just ended, though that is typically how the draft goes. I might just be living in my Boston Celtics bubble, Sap, and that's the long and short of it.
You probably are. And also, this draft came a month later than the draft normally comes, right? Normally, the draft is around the 22nd of June, right after the NBA Finals. This one, we're almost into August. So a lot of these college players that are predominantly one and done, we haven't seen them for like 4 months. Like, it seems like years ago that Jalen Suggs hit that 35-foot three-pointer to put Gonzaga into the national championship game against Baylor, right? And then
Yeah.
Baylor with the big surprise, not that they beat Gonzaga, but how easily they beat Gonzaga. Like, all those players from that team, it's like, who was that guy that was hitting threes, or who was that guy that was playing really good defense? That it seems so long ago. So I think that that's part of it as well. And also college basketball, I think the last couple of years, let's not forget 2 years ago, there wasn't even a tournament. This year, there was a tournament. It doesn't have the same buzz the last few years as it normally does. It doesn't have the same following that college football does. I think when you get to the NFL draft, there's much more buzz because I think we know more about those players, especially the quarterbacks. We see them on a week to week basis. Where in basketball, Cade Cunningham does appear to be the best player in this draft, and he may be an all-star, perennial all-star going forward. But how much did people see of Oklahoma State this year? So I think that that's part of it as well. But no, I agree with you. There's some fantastic players here. I mean, look at Jalen Suggs, who is my favorite player in this draft, went fifth. That means that this draft's pretty damn deep.
Yeah, it did appear to be deep, and again, that's it's impossible to fully make a prediction
Right.
on that will bear any fruit. On the day after the draft, some drafts look like they're terrible; they end up being really good because, like we talked about many times, Sap, over the past almost a year of doing this show together, more than ever, you're finding prospects later in the draft that end up to
Hmm.
be great players. Look at the MVP this year. Look at the Finals MVP this year. I mean,
Hmm.
both non-lottery picks. Hell, Jokic was a second round pick. So
Right.
um, it's hard to fully analyze the draft, and I think it's harder than ever because these guys are now coming from all over the planet, and sometimes take a while to get going. And so a guy might be viewed as a second round pick on the day of the draft, and then years later, you look at it as a franchise cornerstone, a la Nikola Jokic. I know that doesn't happen very often, but I'm telling you, and I've said this before in the show, Sap, it's going to start happening more and more
Hmm.
frequently because it's more of a global game, and because there's just more people are opting to play basketball, not just in this country, but all over the world. So there will naturally be more talent in the pool, and scouting is still not a perfect science.
No.
Again, that's all you have to mention is how many teams missed on Giannis, who just put up one of the greatest NBA Finals performances we've ever seen. I mean, 14 teams passed on the guy.
Yeah, I mean, you look at second round picks over the years. Dennis Rodman, Hall of Famer. Draymond Green, I think, will be a Hall of Famer at some point. Manu Ginobili will be a Hall of Famer. Chris Middleton of the Milwaukee Bucks, major contributor to them winning the championship this year. By most accounts, he was their second best player. There were nights where he was their second best player. There were other nights where uh, Drew Holiday was their best player. But you get my point that, Middleton is the second best player on a championship team, and he went in the second round. So it can be done. Sure, give me the first pick in the draft, especially if it's LeBron James or Tim Duncan or Shaquille O'Neal or someone like that, Magic Johnson. And I couldn't screw that up because you're getting a generational type player. But there have been a lot of players that were the first pick in the draft, like Michael Olowokandi, that just didn't work out, or Kwame Brown. They just were essentially busts. So you can find players in the middle of the first round. As you said, Giannis was the 15th pick in the first round, as was Steve Nash. Between those two guys, they have 4 league MVPs, and now Giannis is a champion. Kawhi Leonard was just outside of the lottery. He's one of the best players in all of basketball. Even Steph Curry, he was the 7th pick in the first round. Minnesota had 2 chances to draft him, but they decided not to. They took Johnny Flynn and Ricky Rubio, both point guards, instead of Steph Curry. So there are mistakes that are made, and you have to jump on them. I think that's why the Celtics are in a really tough position right now, because when they had those mid first round picks the last few years, they kind of blew it, right? With Romeo Langford. We'll see about Neesmith if he turns out to be some sort of good player. Not that those guys, if they developed, would help you, but they would also be great chips to trade in the future. Those guys don't have that much value right now. That's why it's so important in that middle of the first round that you get a quality player that either is part of your core 6 or 7, or someone that you could put together with other players and assets and make a trade to get a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, we're in total agreement there, Sap. We've talked about this, extensively, that the Celtics really blew their opportunity to try to land a third star
Hmm.
next to Tatum and Brown because they just didn't use those picks as assets. They thought we're
Right.
smarter than everybody else. We're just going to nail these picks. Well, I mean, they didn't. And I like Neesmith. I don't know that he'll ever be more than a rotation player. And it's a tall task to say, hey, you're picking in the end of the lottery, draft a star. I know that's not easy, but they did have a couple cracks at it, and they may have with Langford. I don't even know if he can stay on the court for a full season long. So
Hmm.
who knows how long he lasts in the NBA? And as far as the other guys they had, a lot of them aren't even in the league anymore. Certainly not on the team. So yeah, they certainly blew an opportunity there, Sap, without a doubt. Going into the draft last night, again, the Celtics didn't have a first round pick. We'll talk about their second round pick a little bit later. 1, 2, and 3 went exactly how everybody thought it would go. Cunningham 1 to the Pistons, Green 2 to the Rockets, Mobley 3 to the Cavaliers. And I like all three of those prospects, Sap. I think that they are probably going to be outstanding players, though
Mhm.
typically it's that number 2 slot that seems to, for whatever reason, not pan out. I really like Jalen Green. I was impressed that, 18-year-old was putting up really good numbers against grown men fighting for a spot in the NBA because he was on that G League Ignite team. So I think that gives teams a pretty good chance to scout him. He got a lot of Kobe Bryant comparisons last night, which is obviously, a, a little bit ahead of things.
Well, why not? One guy was compared to LeBron James, that being, of course, Kate Cunningham, and Evan Mobley was compared to Bill Russell. So why not? Jalen Green is going to be Kobe Bryant. They're not too hyperbolic on ESPN last night.
Yeah, I mean, I see Jalen Green certainly a scorer, and I think he'll be able to do that in the NBA. Now, Kobe Bryant's one of the great scorers we've ever seen. Can he reach that level? I mean, that's a lofty goal. Mobley reminds me of a Chris Bosh clone.
Exactly.
He's
Exactly.
he's Chris Bosh,
And
which
what's wrong with
that's a
that?
nice
Why not?
player. It's not Bill
Yes, a
Russell,
10-time.
but
It's a 10-time All-Star, 2-time champion, a guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point, like an outstanding player, a pro's pro. Why can't you just compare him to him? I mean, I know there's more clicks when you say something like he reminds me of Bill Russell. I mean, come on. I mean, if it was
yeah, well,
Olajuwon coming out in '84, of course, Lou Alcindor back in 1969, yeah, make that comparison. But Evan Mobley, the third pick, who looks like a stretch four, who can defend, yeah, Chris Bosh, that's a wonderful comparison. And Cade Cunningham might be Grant Hill, right? I mean, that's not exactly a bad thing.
yeah,
I'm sure Piston fans would be quite happy if he's Grant Hill and is more durable. And if Jalen, the
Green.
second pick, Jalen Green. There's so many Jalen's in the draft, I lost
Yep.
track. Jalen Green, if he's Jalen Brown, that's a good guy, right? So, but instead we got to go with, okay, this is LeBron, Kobe, and Bill Russell. So let's pick, three of the 9 greatest players in the history of the sport.
There were 3 Jalen's in the draft and 1 Jaden in the draft, Sap.
Yeah,
So, you're
yeah.
off the hook. You can screw
No
up your Jalen's and your
Johns, no
Jadens.
Johns or
No
Jets. I
Johns,
mean,
no
no.
Jets. No,
There was a
no.
there was a Jonathan Kuminga, who has similar athletic ability to me. So
Yeah, very
that's the
similar.
comparison.
Very
Very
similar body
similar, yeah.
types.
Yeah,
um,
6'6", 230 with about 4% body fat. That's me.
it's basically just describing you. I know your screen is dark right now, but it's people have seen you. That's exactly what you look like.
That's what I think
Um,
of.
s- so again, 1, 2, and 3 went pretty much chalk, and then the Raptors threw a wrench into everything, and they took Scotty Barnes at 4. And then Jalen Suggs, who was expected to go 4, he slips to number 5, and the Magic, who have 1,000 point guards, decided, hey, let's take another point guard.
Mhm.
Though I really like Suggs, so I have no problem with that. I will say this, Sap. I asked you and you asked me to do our best and worst picks of the draft.
Mhm.
So immediately I go to that Scotty Barnes at number 4.
Me
I
too.
don't hate the prospect, but the Raptors are not a free agent destination, as we've well established on this show. And so they really, really need to get this pick right when they are picking this high, which is rarely because they're a very
Mhm.
well run organization. And you and I love Masai Ujiri and completely trust him. And so maybe we'll be looking foolish criticizing this pick. But to me, Suggs seemed like almost a can't miss player. Not necessarily because I think he's polished offensively, but I think day one he'll be able to play defense in the NBA.
Yep.
So I know he'll be able to have a place on a roster, and I think he is going to be good offensively too. He reminds me of sort of, maybe he has that Kyle Lowry sort of tough
Mhm.
mentality. He was a
Mhm.
football player. Um,
Bigger
I
version, more athletic version of Kyle Lowry. That's a good comparison. Or even if you want, Jason Kidd is probably his ceiling. Again, his
yeah,
ceiling.
I mean, so I really like the prospect. I know you liked him a lot too.
Mhm.
Scotty Barnes has a very high ceiling, but I'd also say a pretty low floor, similar to the Magic took guy Jonathan Isaacs a couple years
Mhm.
ago. I thought the
Yep.
same thing of him. Really high ceiling, really low floor. You're kind of really, really taking a chance there. Barnes seems like he's the type of guy who everybody seems to really like. He plays really good defense. He's long and athletic. His offensive game is, really, really a work in progress. I just thought that if you're rarely picking in the top like the Raptors do, I don't know if it's a good time to really take a big risk there. And
I think
so
that
that was one of my least favorite picks, and that was
exactly, me
Barnes at
too. That
4.
my two least favorite picks were by franchises that normally develop players better than anybody. That being the Toronto Raptors and the San Antonio Spurs. I don't understand Scotty Barnes going in front of Jalen Suggs, and I have no clue why the San Antonio Spurs drafted Alabama point guard Josh Primo. I think they overreached for him at number 12, but because it's San Antonio at number 12 and Toronto at number 4, you cut them a little slack because they normally do a great job drafting and developing players, right? So if that's the case, then they may see these two guys as players that can fit their system and that they can make better. And again,
Right.
Masai Ujiri to me is the best executive in the NBA. I'm not sure if he's making this pick or if the general manager's making this pick. He's president of basketball operations. I'm sure when you have the 4th pick in the draft, someone like Masai Ujiri is heavily involved in making that pick. I thought they should have taken Jalen Suggs because I think Suggs can be the face of a franchise. He's got that leadership ability. He literally was a quarterback, an all-state quarterback in high school. He's got that feel to him, kind of like Jason Kidd. Like he'll be the guy in charge. He's got to work on his offensive games, but I think he'll be an outstanding defensive player right away. The safer pick would have been Jalen Suggs, but right, 3 years from now, we may look and say, boy, Masai Ujiri is the best executive in basketball, and he picked the right guy in Scotty Barnes.
Yeah, I mean, Barnes certainly, like I said, he's got a very high ceiling, and he's kind of what a lot of teams look for, which is those long wings who can score, and that's what everybody wants.
Yep.
I just think go with the guy who is at that point, go with the best player available, and I thought it was Suggs. But maybe Barnes has a higher ceiling. I can concede that, but I think
Sure.
the floor is far more safe with Suggs than it is with Barnes. The other pick I didn't like, Sap, happened. One pick after the Magic took Suggs, and that's Josh Giddey out of Australia. The Thunder
Hmm.
took him. Uh, I mean, Australia is certainly an up and coming basketball country. I mean, they're producing more players every year. I don't know too much about the prospect. I will say that, but in watching him, he looks like he's going to take a while. It already seems like everything the Thunder do is going to take them a long time. I don't see a ton of athleticism from him. I think he looks like a good shooter, maybe a good slasher a little bit, not a ton of athleticism, not a lot of defensive ability. I just the Thunder, it seems like at this rate, Sap, are going to take a decade to be relevant or competitive.
Well, they've got enough picks, don't they? I mean, they're going into the draft last night, 18 first-round picks over the next 7 years. So they've got ample opportunities. And again, when you have that many first-round picks, you can take a chance. Kind of like Golden State, which was at 7 and 13. They could take a gamble at 7 and Jonathan Kuminga, and then maybe take a safer pick at 13. Oklahoma City, which has so many first-round picks, probably looked at Giddy and said, if everything comes together, this guy can be an elite player. Let's take him now. If we fail, we have some other picks to fall back on. So that's probably what Sam Presti was thinking about in Oklahoma City, that if they lose out on this one, there's always another one that they could nail.
Yeah, and obviously, they have a bunch of picks to fall back on, Sap. And coming into the draft, you're reading every day that they were desperately trying to get into the top 3, offering even Gilgeous-Alexander in that 6th pick to move up. So clearly, they thought highly of the top 3 players in this
Hmm.
draft. And I don't know if I was a team and if I was the Cavs and I was offered the 6th pick and Gilgeous-Alexander for 3, I would have done that. And now that was what was rumored. That doesn't necessarily make it true, but maybe the Thunder aren't as high on Gilgeous-Alexander as we thought. Maybe they think he's more of a secondary or third type player, and they viewed those
Hmm.
top 3 as potentially ones franchise type players. I'm unsure, but it's just if you're a Thunder fan, it's going to be a while. I mean, really, this is a long process. We talked about Philadelphia as the process. This one might take even longer because they didn't get the pick they were hoping for this year, which would sort of expedite it. Obviously, we expect Cade Cunningham to play a big role for Detroit. If he becomes the player a lot of people think he is, then Detroit should be back in playoff contention in the next 2 or 3 years. As far as Oklahoma City goes, they don't look like they have that player that can really vault them into being a competitive team on their roster right now. And certainly, I don't think that Giddy is going to be able to do that for them in the next
Right.
2 years. He seems like a much more of a far away play. Did you like the pick at all, Sap?
As far as Giddy,
Yeah.
Again, he was kind of a mystery pick because I mean the other players we at least got to see in college basketball or we got to see in the G League, so we had some sort of tape on them. I mean, we could go look at what Giddy did in Australia. If you want to go, on YouTube, Google him, whatever the case may be, you can find out about that. I think people are always kind of looking for that player who I'm trying to describe it as a player who you don't know as much about, but some of the things you see you really like, so you take a chance on him. Wasn't Dante Exum also played in Australia and was
Yes.
drafted very high in 2014?
Yes.
And I think out of that 2014 draft, he's been a disaster, right? I mean,
It might be
he's
the worst player in the entire draft, arguably.
exactly. I mean, obviously, Jokic was a second round pick and won an MVP. That's shows you how deep that draft was. And that draft, remember, I think we just started working together over 15-10. That's all we could talk about was that draft coming up because it was going to be Wiggins and Jabari Parker and Joel
Right.
Embiid and
Very
Marcus
hyped
Smart.
draft.
Yeah, Julius Randle, and like it never really materialized. I mean, the best player in that draft is Nikola Jokic, who was, I believe, the 42nd pick in that draft. So sometimes you find players later in that draft. I mean, we 5 years from now we may look down and say, boy, what a great pick that Jared Butler was by Utah out of Baylor at number 40. In fact, I think that's one of the best picks of the night because I think he's an outstanding player. He's not quite as good as Davion Mitchell, his teammate, but I think he's got a very well-rounded game and could be a nice, third guard on Utah, backing up Donovan Mitchell, who's had some injury concerns. So, you're gonna have to judge this draft 5 years down the road. But Giddy was just such a mysterious figure that it just seemed like Oklahoma City was taking a chance that ceiling was going to be so high and they'll deal with the ramifications if he doesn't reach it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're hoping he's Klay Thompson. Most of the
Right,
comparisons I saw say Joe Ingles. Joe Ingles is a nice player,
right.
another Aussie, by the way. It's kind of a lazy comparison, just comparing two Australians to each other. Um, but you know, if he's Klay Thompson, yeah, sure, you
Oh,
nailed it. That's like gangbusters. If he's Joe Ingles, you probably could have waited a little bit longer, and like that guy from Gonzaga, Corey Kispert, probably is similar type player, and you could have got him, 10 picks later.
right. Boy, did
So
Kispert look good at the draft, though? I
yeah,
mean, he
yeah,
was
he did
so
look
well
good.
dressed. The hair, when they showed him, I go, "Who's this dude? He's a handsome fella." And it's Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga because we always saw him playing with the headband. Well, he
Yeah.
has quite the head of hair. With no wonder he needed a headband when he was playing. He's also what a 3-year starter, so I mean, he's an older guy. So those guys, I think they're interesting when you go draft someone who's 22 or even 23. I think you're getting an adult at that point. So there's a few things you don't have to worry about that they should be able to adapt to the NBA. And again, there are 19-year-olds who are more mature than 22-year-olds. Like Jalen Suggs is 19. I expect him to step right in and be a leader and be a mature guy because he's just built that way, right? And you may
Yeah.
get a 22-year-old player that never grows up. I mean, that's also a possibility. But yeah, Corey Kispert, man, that's one good-looking dude and one great head of hair.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great suits last night. I love Jalen
Yeah,
Suggs, like
me
silver
too.
suit.
Yep.
Jalen Green had a great suit too, and he has got an awesome head of hair as well.
Ooh,
The second pick to the
he
Rockets.
sure does.
So I mean, usually you don't see it because usually he plays with the braids in.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he's got a great head of hair too. Yeah, the style is obviously a big part of the NBA draft and part of these guys' brands, and it was certainly on display last night. You don't see, sort of ill-fitting suits anymore. They're very highly tailored suits. No one's swimming in their suit anymore, like back in the Paul
Oh
Pierce
man,
days or Jalen Rose when he had that red suit and was like 3 sizes too big for
even
him.
even the '03 draft, the suits
Yeah,
were enormous.
LeBron's white suit was
Whoa,
was very big.
a big
I wonder
man
if
wearing a white suit.
he
I
probably
wonder
still
if that.
has that, right?
Yeah, that would be like something Elvis could sell later in his life. Like let's
Yeah,
get
man.
LeBron's
What would
suit
that
at the
suit go
draft.
for on the open market? That'd be
A
a pretty awesome
lot of
item.
lot of money. I think Nick Wright would buy that pretty
Oh, for
quickly.
sure. Or you'd sell
Well,
all
if I had the
all
money,
your
if I had the
assets.
money, absolutely. I'd be like the Lakers just throwing as much stuff at the Washington Wizards to get Russell Westbrook. Just take everything I have, like some junk, uh, three pieces, some draft picks, whatever I have to get that big white suit, which I couldn't fit in, but of course I'm not going to wear it. It's a collector's item.
Yeah. So, Sap, as far as my favorite picks, I'll just
Yep.
list them off rapid fire for you. I only had two picks, those two, Barnes and Giddy, that I really stood out to me as like, man, I don't like that much. I understand what you're saying with Primo too. I could totally get that. He's the youngest player in the draft. He was the youngest player in Division I basketball last
Hmm.
year, so it's going to
Right.
take him a while, obviously. I really liked obviously at 1. I mean, I got to put that as one of my favorite picks because I saw him play almost Kate Cunningham in like week 1 or 2 of the NCAA season. I said, yeah, this guy's going 1.
You
You
talked
could
about
just
him right away. Right
you could
away.
just
But
see
back
it.
in December, you kept saying this is the guy. This is
Yeah,
a once in every 5 year type of player.
some guys you can just see it because you know what he's got a man's body already. He plays
Hmm.
offense and defense. He was clearly as a freshman the leader of that Oklahoma
Hmm.
State team that was pretty good. You could just see it. So I think he was a no brainer at 1. I know there was some buzz about Jalen Green, and I'm sure he'll be a very nice player too. But there, so you got to give Detroit credit where credit's due. They didn't get, lured away. They were locked in. And he seems like he wants to be in Detroit, and he could have one of the
Yep.
great nicknames in the NBA, as they talked about last night, Motorcade, which is perfect.
Ooh,
He's in the
I
Motor
like that.
City, Cade
Yep.
Cunningham, Motorcade. So,
Yep.
yeah,
And he
obviously I like that pick.
and I like him too in terms of the way he spoke too. He's got like a deep voice. He sounds much older than he is. He's got a daughter. He seems very mature. I think he's gonna take over that franchise, be the lead guy, the face of the franchise, and he's got a great game in terms of it's so well rounded. He's smart. He can pass, rebound. I mean, I think he reminds me a little bit of Grant Hill. I think that's a pretty good comp, which I'm sure Piston fans would be quite pleased with.
Yeah, and Grant Hill was really the last like star player for
Yeah,
Detroit. I know they
yeah.
won a championship with I mean, obviously a team that was great, but no real stars on that
That was
Pistons title team.
no,
So they're
that was
kind
an
of starved
ensemble
for
unit. Yeah,
a star player. I mean, the last star, yeah, you could say Grant Hill, but even you could go back and say Isaiah Thomas, maybe even.
it was
I mean,
Isaiah Thomas and a lot of role players. When you think about it, I know Rodman and Dumars are in the Hall of Fame. They were in the Hall of Fame because they played on championship teams as standalone players. Rodman would be a Hall of Famer because he led the league at rebounding, 6 times, a defensive player of the year. I mean, on his own, he's a Hall of Famer. As Joe Dumars to me is very similar to Chauncey Billups' career, and Billups isn't in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, Isaiah Thomas was the star of that Pistons team. Grant Hill, who I think would have gone down as an all-time great if he didn't deal with all those injuries, and he ended up, before he got injured, went to Orlando, and his career just never flourished the way we thought it was going to be. Yeah, there's star for star, and I think this young man can be that guy.
Yeah, and I think it's a great basketball market, and they're the fans
Yeah.
are really great when the team is good. It's raucous. I know they don't play in the
Hmm.
Palace anymore. I think they
They play
played the
downtown now. They play
yeah.
downtown, and from what I understand, Detroit is really in a rebuild right now as a city. It's been revitalized. Dan Gilbert, who is one of my least favorite owners in the NBA, the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, has put a lot of money into downtown Detroit. He's from Detroit. His business is in Detroit. And from everything I hear is the downtown is completely revitalized. A lot of restaurants, hotels, bars, and now the Pistons and the Red Wings are playing downtown, which is great. That's a great sports city.
Yeah, it really is, and the NBA is more fun when they're good and they're
Absolutely.
I think Cade Cunningham fits the mold that say too because he does play defense. He's not just an offensive player, and
Blue collar guy. Yep.
I really think the fans will embrace him there. I know they were
Yep.
chanting "We want Cade" at a Tigers game the other day, so I think
Good
it's
for
good for
them.
Detroit, good for the NBA to have Detroit get a guy who you can market around,
Yep.
and sometimes all you need is that one piece to be able to lure some guys there. And
Sure.
if Detroit is really being rebuilt and Kate Cunningham becomes a star player, maybe Detroit becomes, a free agent destination. I don't know. I just know that Detroit is a really good market when the team is good and the fans are into it.
And right now, their general manager is being lauded as one of the best in the business, and Troy Weaver. He worked under Sam Presti in Oklahoma City. He pushed for Russell Westbrook being drafted in 2008. He also pushed for James Harden to be drafted in 2009. So obviously, he knows talent. You go back to that 2008 draft, it was a shock that the Oklahoma City Thunder took Russell Westbrook. He was not supposed to be the fourth pick in the draft, but Troy Weaver, who was their personnel director at that time, really pushed for him. He obviously knows personnel, and I think Detroit's got themselves a really good general manager in Troy Weaver.
Yeah, and this is a great way to jumpstart the process because
Yep.
I mean they were pretty devoid of talent last year, and now suddenly they have the guy that was to me the can't miss number 1 player in this draft. So yeah, that was obviously one of the best picks without a doubt. I liked what Golden State did with Kuminga at 7. Not
Hmm.
because I don't think he's going to play a big role on the Warriors at all this year, but I think they had to take the guy who has the highest ceiling to try to package him in a trade, which is what they want. Golden State didn't want to be using their picks last night.
No,
They wanted
no.
to have traded them, but they were wise to get a guy who I think a lot of teams will be intrigued by as a possible trade chip. So take the guy who not necessarily will help you the most this season, but could be the most attractive trade chip. So I think that was a shrewd move to take Kuminga there for Golden State. Again, if Golden State's going into the season with this roster as currently constituted, I can't see him playing all that much this year, but I do think he's a nice trade chip, Seth.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's exactly what they did. I mean, they can pick the two, they can keep the two picks that they selected or package them with, Wiseman or some other future assets. I know there's supposed to be an on Bradley Beal, who apparently wants to stay in Washington. Maybe Dame Lillard, which I'm trying to figure out what Golden State would do. Look, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, and Klay Thompson on the court together would be incredible to watch. Would it win a championship when we've seen the last three NBA champions be built in terms of being big physical defensive rebounding teams? Golden State's trying to do it a different way. It would be wild to watch Dame, Steph, and Clay on the court together. I don't know if it would produce a championship.
Yeah, so we'll have to see with Golden State once. I know that they rejected a trade that the Sixers offered them for Ben Simmons, who I think would be a great fit on Golden
Oh,
State.
he sure would, man.
It was number 7, number I think 14, Wiggins and James Wiseman, who was the number 2 pick last year for Ben Simmons. The Warriors said no to that, so I
I
guess
would
they're
have done it.
looking for a player a little bit better than Ben Simmons.
I
So
would have
I
done
think,
that. Oh,
yeah, I just I don't see Golden State with the window they have right now. I don't see that they should value these younger players as much. If they truly want to win right now, you need to make a win now move, and that's obviously a lofty price. You're giving 3 lottery picks. One was the number 2 pick
right.
last year, and a not borderline all-star because he's not really that Andrew Wiggins, but a nice player in
Nice
Andrew
player. Yeah.
Wiggins. Uh, for a guy who he's got some things to figure out, but I do think with having Curry and having Thompson on that team, he would have less scoring pressure if Thompson can come back from injury. And him and Draymond Green, they'd have the defense all set there. So yeah, I mean, I would have not just rejected it out of hand. Maybe I would have asked if I could get a little bit more from Philly. Maybe some extra role players like
Mhm.
Maxey. But yeah, I don't think it was that outrageous of a trade offer. I mean, it would have been good for both teams, I think. I don't think Philadelphia
Mhm.
would be selling themselves short. But yeah, Golden State, if they're holding out for Beal or Lillard, I don't know that they're necessarily better fits than Simmons would have been
No,
there.
no, it's not, because Simmons gives you the defense, which they
They're better
don't.
players.
They're better players, but they have guys like that, if not better than them, right? I mean, Steph Curry is better than Bradley Beal and Dame Lillard, right? Klay Thompson coming back. You know what I feel about Klay Thompson. I think he's the most transferable player in the NBA. You could put him on any team in the NBA, he would work. I mean, because he's a great 3-point shooter and a great defender. Now we got to see how he comes back, because he's missed 2 consecutive years with injuries, so that's a lot to ask him to do. The other thing too that I find really interesting about Golden State is they are so far beyond the luxury tax. I mean, the luxury tax penalty for them is $125 million. So I
Yeah.
mean, how much more salary can they take on? I mean, I know they're a very wealthy franchise. They can write a big check and they're going to be all in with Steph having 3 or 4 more great years. Same thing with Clay and Draymond. But, maybe having these young players at a fairly solid cost control, they could maybe swing it that way. I mean, Simmons to me would be a perfect fit on that team. Imagine him setting up Curry and Clay Thompson, although I would love to see Ben Simmons and Draymond Green on the same team, because by the third quarter of the first game, I could imagine Draymond Green absolutely screaming at Ben Simmons, because talk about 2 totally different dynamics there. That would be fun to watch.
Yeah, but it's clearly, it seems like it's not happening unless Golden State, really has a change of
It
heart
could,
here.
right? Yeah, it could happen,
Um,
right? Because I mean, there's things that can be done if they sweeten the pot from Philadelphia, that maybe it can happen.
Yeah. So we'll have to see. But I do like that pick based off of, I think it gives them again a nicer trade chip than taking a guy who's maybe be a little bit more helpful to the team this year. And then my other 2 favorite picks, Sap, were the 2 guards from Baylor. Davion
Yeah,
Mitchell at 9 to Sacramento. You mentioned Jared Butler. He went from at number 40 to the Pelicans, who then traded him to the Jazz.
right.
Mitchell, I mean, I love him.
Yep.
He's the perfect type of player for me. He plays so hard on defense. He's a winner. His teammates rave about him. He's a little undersized, and that's really the only knock on him. And he played a couple of years he played, instead of a one and done, he played 3 years in college. Um, so I just think he's ready to go right now, and it will help you win immediately. And he still has more ceiling too. To
Yep.
me, they compared him a little bit to Donovan Mitchell. I like that. I mean, I think he looks like, to me, a little bit smaller than Marcus Smart, but a little bit better at scoring.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
and I
Or
think
Drew
that,
Holiday.
or Drew
Drew
Holiday,
Holiday's
and you
another
saw
good
the impact
comparison.
he just had there. That's a
Yep.
great comparison, Sap. Now, the Kings are, they have a glut of guards now with Fox, and last year they took Halliburton, and now they have Mitchell. But all three of those guys are really good players, and Halliburton and Mitchell are really excellent defensively. Fox, we've seen what he can. He's a blur with the ball in his hands. I,
Hmm.
I don't know if they're going to end up keeping all three. It might work, but I think that they took the best player available there, and for the
Yep.
Kings, that's that they got to just keep doing, because they, for some reason, have not done that in the past. The Bagley pick stands out like a sore thumb when, Luka Doncic went
Ugh.
right after that, and then, right after that was Trey Young. So that really hurt. But I just love Mitchell. I love what he brings to a team. If the Celtics had a pick in the first round, I would have loved for them to try to get Davion Mitchell.
Oh, he's sensational. I love him. Everything you hear is he is the hardest working guy that's coming out of this draft. He spends countless hours on videotape trying to improve his game, trying to study his opponent's game. He's got that feel to him. And again, when I compare a point guard to a quarterback, that's as big a compliment as I can make. It's just a guy who has that cachet, has that charisma. I think Jalen Suggs has that. I think Davion Mitchell has that. Now, Suggs is younger, bigger, a little more athletic. I think Mitchell's a more developed shooter, but I think Suggs can catch up to him because he's so young. But those are my two favorite players in this draft. I expect both of those guys to have really long, outstanding careers. Look, Sacramento with Halliburton, Mitchell, and De'Aaron Fox, that is a great backcourt. They still have Buddy Hield, who can shoot the hell out of the ball.
Yeah, not for long. He
Not
does
for
not want to
long.
be there.
No, he doesn't want to be there. I mean, the Lakers were in on him, and who the hell knows where he's going to end up going. He's another guy that I think he goes to a contending team, it's going to work out great because he's an outstanding three-point shooter, and that's what every contending team is looking for. Although the last three NBA champions weren't great three-point shooting teams. Like, everybody's talking about great three-point shooting and the guards control the game. And in the end, the last three champions were all big, physical, defensive teams that weren't great shooting threes, but they were really good defending threes. If you don't shoot threes well, you better defend them.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that's just of vital importance in the NBA, is defending the 3-point line. And yeah, the Bucks were obviously fantastic at it because they were long, and they had. I said this, and we talked about it a lot. I thought they had the best defensive
Yep,
roster in basketball, and it paid huge
absolutely.
dividends for them in the NBA Finals and throughout the playoffs. Sap,
Not
Butler
to
too.
continue, just to jump in with
Yeah,
one
sorry.
thing.
Go ahead.
No, in terms of that best defense by Milwaukee, let's give a lot of credit to Giannis. I mean, he's been getting a lot of credit the last week and a half, deservedly so, for what he did, winning the
Yeah, more
championship, being in the
credit.
finals.
Pile it on.
No, he's getting a lot of credit to the point where in some sense, when I keep hearing him talking about how he did it the right way and all that stuff,
Oh, I
it's
love
getting
it.
kind of
I
a bit
can't
of a
get enough.
turn off. Well,
No,
I mean,
keep doing it.
I wrote a column. It's on full press coverage saying, I know that Giannis was trashing. It felt like he was trashing Durant and James Harden more than, say, LeBron, but he was kind of trashing all three. And I just wanted to make a point that LeBron, it becomes a super team when he shows up there. He doesn't necessarily join a super team, whereas Durant joined a super team and Harden joined a super team. But I get all that. But here's the praise for Giannis. When your best player plays that hard and plays that good defensively, the rest of the team's going to follow suit, right? I mean, it's the Tom Brady effect, the LeBron James effect. When they're your hardest working guys and the most diligent guys, if you're the 48th guy on the NFL roster or the ninth guy on a basketball roster, you better be ready to play because, those guys bring it every single night. And I think Giannis does that probably better than anybody in the league. He plays with a chip on his shoulder, like he's, trying to earn a new contract. And I think that filters through with the rest of the players. Now, we knew Drew Holiday was a good defensive player in his other places, but I think he became even better knowing that, his best player is that invested defensively.
Sure. And I mean, and when you have, a 20-foot wingspan like Giannis does, you cover a lot of ground in the NBA.
Man.
The court is not that big anymore with these gigantic people roaming. So, Giannis
Phew.
can cover a ton of ground. He's big and tall and extremely long. I mean, he's like he's like an airplane out there. So yeah, I mean that makes a big difference when you have your best defensive player can cover, half the court in a matter of a
Right.
second. Pretty good. It makes everybody else better defensively. So yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, Sap, that the defense of the 3-point matters a lot too. Just quickly before we wrap up the draft thing and go to the big trade yesterday, because there were a lot of trades. I'm talking about the actual big trade with Westbrook to the Lakers. Just since we're based here in Boston, Sap, we have a lot of Celtics fans who listen to the show. Celtics with the 45th pick in the draft took a Frenchman, Jejuan Bagarin. Yeah, I had to look up the pronunciation for that. I'm not even positive I'm getting it 100% right. He is a draft and stash guy. He certainly didn't light my world on fire watching his highlight tapes. I can't say I watched a ton of him before the draft. I knew the name because he was one of the higher ranked international prospects. I, I don't know if he ever even ends up playing a game for the Celtics realistically, Sap. It was Brad Stevens' first draft pick. He had the trade with Kemba Walker earlier in the year, so he had traded the first round pick away. This just seems like we want to have a complete a roster of NBA ready players on the team, and so we're going to use this pick to have a guy play overseas and not count against our roster. I don't know if they actually really like the player any more than that, other than they hope he might turn into something. But I have my doubts that they think he's a big fit for them in the long term.
Yeah, because the last French player they drafted worked out so well, right?
Oh Jesus!
Yabusele. Yeah, so I mean,
Ugh.
why not take another guy that is not going to perform at a very high level? They do have another French player that they may re-sign, and Evan Fournier, who's playing very well at the Olympics, was the best player in the court when France upset the United States in the first game of the Olympics. But yeah, I mean, this is just a stash, player, right? You're going to just have him develop. If you catch fire, then you got something good. I mean, where they drafted him, they could have taken Luca Garza instead, who went to Detroit, which I think is one of the best picks in the draft. At 52, you take a chance on a player like that. The only thing is the Celtics have plenty of big guys. And if they had been short of big guys, maybe they would have taken Luca Garza instead. I mean, if they had added him to the roster, he'd be their fifth big, which, you don't need all of that.
Right.
Although we still have to see what's going to happen with Al Horford and Tristan Thompson and, Robert Williams III, just see where all these players are. Moses Brown, those are the four centers they have. So we're going to have to see what they do with that. But yeah, I mean, the Celtics had to include that first round pick to make the Al Horford deal work, to get that salary of Kemba Walker off the books and give them some more cap flexibility going forward. So if that's what you had to do, that's what you had to do. It's always nice to have a first round pick, because if you strike it, you can get some player in the middle of the first round who can contribute. Although the Celtics haven't done a really good job of that over the years, but now you've got someone new in charge, and Brad Stevens. Do give the Celtics credit. I mean, their late first round picks have worked out pretty good. Robert Williams III, if he can just stay healthy, I think could be a real piece on this team. And Peyton Pritchard had a nice rookie year. So they did okay late in the first round recently. It's just in the middle of the first round when they screw up, whether it be Neesmith or Langford or Grant Williams or any of those guys. But yeah, this seems to be of no consequence, the player they drafted, and, just move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were some players that were intriguing to me where they were picking. Uh, the kid out of Auburn that slid in the draft, Sharif Cooper. I thought he
Yep.
was an intriguing prospect there. BJ Boston from Kentucky, which would have been cool to have a guy whose last name was Boston playing for the
Yeah.
Celtics. He was one of the top prospects coming into his freshman year. He was a little underwhelming at Kentucky, so he slid. Those guys I think were interesting. I get what you're saying with Garza. He's a 7-footer who can shoot threes and rebound, so that's intriguing in and of itself. But I have, if what they're doing is saying we're going to stash this player because we want to have a complete roster full of veterans and guys who can play, then I like that mentality. If they truly think, oh, we outsmarted everybody and we drafted this French guy in the second round, and in 5 years, watch out. Well, then I don't really like the pick because
Right.
I didn't even like what Brad Stevens said after the draft. He said, we want to keep our medium and long term goals, flexible and open. Well, I don't want any medium or long term goals. I want the goal to be right now. You have two players that are approaching the prime of their career, and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The only goal should be surround them with as much talent as possible and try to win now, not
Yep.
looking 10 years ahead and trying to win in 10 years. No, try to win right now. We just saw a Bucks team and a Phoenix team in the finals. Neither one had amazing rosters that are like all-time rosters. So it's not like the Celtics should be that far away based off what we just saw in the NBA finals. Now, yeah, you need a couple of breaks, but that happens every year in the NBA. So just have the team have a competent roster. Again, I don't care about what the roster looks like in 10 years right now. I don't want you planning for 10 years right now. If I was the Thunder, okay, and you have no players that are established, but you got two guys who are all-stars uh, and seemingly should have a little bit of room to continue to get even better. Build around them right now. Don't worry about what it's going to look like in 10 years. So I don't
By
know.
the way, Jet, in 2 years, if they don't see an improvement on the roster, might say, we're leaving. That's the way the NBA works. You're not stuck here forever. And even if your contract exists, you can pull a James Harden and say, I'm out. 2 years left on my contract. I'm not going to play for Houston. I really want to play in Brooklyn. And unless you trade me there, I'm going to continue to go to strip clubs and eat at buffets and get as heavy as John Sapichetti. And then you're going to get nothing in return from me. So, yeah, I could see Jason Tatum at some point who seems to be in awe a lot of the older players in the league, right? Like you could just tell. I mean, Bradley Beal is his best friend in the league. Obviously, he like just adores Kevin Durant's game. Like he may just say, "I want to go play with one of those guys. I'm not the lead guy. I'm comfortable being the second guy. I want to go play with them." So you better start to put some pieces around Tatum and Brown so that they say, "Yeah, we're long term in Boston, and we think we're building something nice."
Yeah, no, you're totally right. You need to show them something and show them that you're willing to improve it. And so Brad Stevens has a tall task ahead. I
Yep.
like who we hired as a head coach. I think that's a step in the right direction. But as we talked about a million times in the past year, Sap, the roster was pretty much dog crap. And so they need to really, really, really improve it. And in free agency, they don't have a ton of money, but they have opportunity that has never really deterred teams in the past. The Lakers didn't have a ton of money, and they just got a star player in Russell Westbrook.
Right.
Which is what we're going to talk about right now, Sap. Pro transition by me.
Nice.
So the Lakers, we heard, we're trying to upgrade their roster desperately. Looking at Buddy Hield looked like what it was going to happen. And then suddenly they make a swerve at the last minute. And instead of Buddy Hield going to the Lakers, they get Russell Westbrook, an LA native, played his basketball at UCLA in college. And they send out to the Wizards Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the number 22 pick in the draft last night, which ended up being traded to, I even know what the hell the Wizards traded, but they traded it away. And in return, the Lakers get Russell Westbrook and a second round pick in 2024 and 2028. Sap, I broke this news to you. I was the Adrian Wojnarowski to your phone.
You were.
What was your initial reaction when I texted you? Now, this was the text I sent. Your favorite player is now going to play with your least favorite player.
Yeah, and I cracked that code pretty quickly. I was on my way to Jimmy's Steerhouse on Route 1 in Saugus to have a nice prime rib, and I was busy kind of following the Major League Baseball trade deadline to see what was going on there. So when you sent that to me, you kind of gave me a clue, and I solved it quickly. Look, I admire Russell Westbrook. I do. I think he is a sensational player. He busts his ass out there. He's incredibly productive. But there's problems I have with his game. I think oftentimes he has the feel of a gerbil on the wheel who just keeps running but doesn't get much done. I think he's somewhat of a selfish player, which is odd considering that he's led the league in assists 3 times. His stats don't necessarily translate to winning. He is more of a force divider than a force multiplier. Obviously, LeBron and Steph Curry, I think, are the 2 best force multipliers in the league. Just make everybody around them better by their leadership and presence, whereas Westbrook, I think, makes those around him worse. And can you think of a modern player who's played with more talent in his career than Russell Westbrook, Jet? I mean, he played with Kevin Durant, James Harden twice, Paul George, Bradley Beal, and now he's playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I mean, he's played
Kevin
with
Durant's the closest guy who's played.
Kevin
with more
Durant's
talent.
the closest, but at least Durant, who I don't think is a force multiplier, but he's easy to play with, right? Because he's an efficient scorer. Something that
he's
Westbrook
so easy to play with. He's ridiculously easy to play with.
Yeah, it's just like he's just out there and he's going to take 20 shots, hit 12 of them, have 32 points, pretty easily. Whereas Russell Westbrook's like just running around like a whirling dervish, and sometimes it's like it's a little bit too much. I'm lukewarm on this trade, to be honest with you. It sounds great. It could be wildly entertaining. It may work, but it also could implode. Now, we're talking about LeBron James and Russell Westbrook. Like, I'm going to put Anthony Davis to the side. I think he's pretty easy to play with, and he does what he does. LeBron, in many ways, is easy to play with, but also difficult to play with. I don't mean to sound like Glenn Ordway and like straddle the fence there.
Right.
He's easy to play with because he can do anything on the court, and he understands the game better than anybody. He can be difficult to play with because he's so demanding, and his IQ is at such a high level that there's times out there where he's 3 steps ahead of his own teammates, which that can be problematic. Russell Westbrook's more of an effort guy, a competitive guy. I get all that. One of those two is going to have to adapt, right? Or I think they're just going to butt heads. Is it going to be LeBron James? He's always been the lead dog. Now he's 36. Maybe he looks at it and says, okay, Westbrook's 32. He's still a great athlete. He still plays his ass off. Maybe I can really lean on him, especially in the regular season, so I don't wear myself down, and we'll let Russell be Russell, and I'll adapt to that. I've always wanted LeBron to play closer to the basket. He's not really thrilled about doing that. I think he'd be incredibly effective playing in the low post, especially as a passer. Man, he'd be like Metal Lock Lemon down there. But I don't know if he's going to adapt to that. One of those two guys is going to have to adapt to make this work. And it's going to probably have to be LeBron, because he could see big picture better than Russell Westbrook. It's going to be interesting to see what the hell happens.
Yeah, I think somebody, I forget who wrote this up on NBC, their basketball website, and I think they nailed it. Regular season, I think it'll work very well for the Lakers. Playoffs, I think that's when it's going to rear its ugly head. We've talked about this before, Sap, and we've both watched LeBron his whole career, and you even more closely than me because he's been your favorite player. LeBron is best when surrounded by shooters. Whatever the antithesis of a shooter is what Russell Westbrook is. A clanker, I guess maybe is what you'd want to call him.
A bricklayer?
Maybe a bricklayer. He's not a good 3-point shooter. He's never going to be a good 3-point shooter. In fact, 2 years ago, Sap, when the Lakers played the Rockets in the bubble, I guess that wasn't 2 years ago, but it was 2 playoffs ago.
2 playoffs ago, yep.
That it was actually a year ago.
It wasn't even a year ago. It was like October or September of last. I know we've kind of had everything condensed. That's why we've seen so many injuries, and why if I owned a team, my players would not be going to the Olympics. But that's another discussion at another point. But you're right, though. I mean, it was 2 playoffs ago where they just let him shoot. Right? They just encouraged him to shoot. There's
pictures of that and video of that finals that exist all over the internet. That series that exists all over the internet, Sap, where the Lakers were literally playing 5 on people away from Russell Westbrook. Just leave him alone. Let him do what he wants.
Please shoot. And
so, it's hard for me to see now them trying to sell this as, he's the perfect fit for this team, just what we needed. I was watching with my dad last night when this trade happened. We were watching the draft together. And I was asking him, what he thought about it. And he likes the trade for the pure reason of he thinks that the Lakers are trying to duplicate what they did with Rondo. And you could say Westbrook is just a better version of Rondo in some ways, triple-double guys, both crap shooters. But I think Rondo at this point in his career probably understands what his role is a little bit better than Westbrook does. Westbrook's always been more talented and remains more talented than Rajon Rondo. But I get what he's saying in that, okay, Rondo couldn't really shoot either. It didn't impact the Lakers to the point where, it was to their detriment. They won a title with Rondo playing a big role in that team. So maybe you look at it that way, Sap, and say, could it work just because Westbrook is limited in his shooting ability? If he took sort of more of a Rondo approach to it, could that be what the missing piece was for the Lakers left?
The comparison is, first of all, Rondo's basketball IQ is off the charts, and Westbrook, I don't really get that feeling. I just see a guy that goes out on the court, is generally the best athlete, and plays his ass off, and isn't always focused on what's the best way to win. He kind of plays with blinders on. I mean, again, that comparison of a gerbil on a wheel, where you see the gerbil just continually running and nothing's getting done. He's getting a lot of exercise, but there's not a lot of progress there. Whereas Rondo is a master on the court. I mean, when you had Rondo and LeBron on the court together, you had two of the five brightest guys in the league. You know, Chris Paul, Steph Curry, pick whoever else. Those are your brightest guys on the court.
So would you rather the brightest guy on the court or the more talented guy? Because I mean, I don't think you can even argue that Westbrook's more talented.
Westbrook's more
Rondo.
talented, of course. I mean, Westbrook is, is a unicorn. I mean, the guy is 6'3". He could lead the league in rebounding. He was top 5 in rebounding this year. He averaged almost 12 rebounds a game. He averaged almost 12 assists a game. I mean, the guy was putting up numbers that were scary, and it did help Washington win, right? Because they played pretty well down the stretch, made it in the playoffs, lost in 5 games to Philadelphia in the first round. So it kind of translated into them winning, but a little bit, but not so much. The other thing too, Jed, Rondo, for a guy who's not a really good shooter, will hit big shots. Whereas Westbrook, for a guy who's a bad shooter, will take a lot of shots and not hit big shots. You know what I'm saying?
So what are they going to ask of him, Sepp? What are the Lakers asking of Westbrook?
I would hope they ask him to be more of a facilitator, right? I also hope that they run more. And again, LeBron and Chris Paul, again, two of the smartest guys in the leagues. For some reason, neither one of them likes to play at up tempo. Now, I get the idea that they're both 36 years old, but LeBron's never liked playing at a fast tempo, which I kind of find perplexing, because whether he has the ball in the middle of the court or he's on the wing, can you think of anybody more scary than LeBron James in those positions? Now I would say Giannis, because he's 10 years younger than LeBron, right? I mean, him on the wing or him in the middle of the fast break is damn scary, because he takes 3 steps and he's at the basket. But LeBron in his heyday was the same thing, but he never liked to play an up tempo. And I'm going to make a football comparison, and I'm going to compare LeBron to my favorite football player, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has also been a guy who doesn't like to play at a fast tempo. And again, I think it goes back to the fact that they have such a high IQ that they overanalyze situations. Rodgers will get to the line of scrimmage, and it's like a pissing contest where he wants to just prove that he's smarter than the defensive coordinator, his own offensive coordinator, the rest of the players on the field, and he tries to outsmart everybody. I kind of get the feeling sometimes that LeBron does that as well, rather than take the easy stuff, like just go to the basket, LeBron. You're unstoppable still at 36. And I would love to see with Westbrook them play at a faster tempo. That I think could work, because Westbrook can play at a fast tempo. If LeBron goes along with him, that could be damn scary. I mean, just think of pick and rolls with Westbrook and Davis, or Westbrook and LeBron, or just on the break with Westbrook and LeBron, alley-oops, Westbrook to both LeBron and Anthony Davis. That could be so scary. And we know how good Westbrook is going to the basket. That's what I want to see. That's why I think LeBron's going to be the one that has to adapt, because I can't see. Westbrook is very rigid. I think LeBron is more adaptable, and it's going to be up to him to be more adaptable and make the proper changes for this thing to work. But the X factor still remains another guy, and it's Anthony Davis, right? If Anthony Davis is healthy and engaged, they're going to be a title contender, because they'll have LeBron and Anthony Davis, and other guys fitting in will be just fine. It still falls on the shoulders, the ample shoulders of Anthony Davis. He's still the biggest X factor for the Lakers. I'm pretty confident LeBron's going to do what he does. Westbrook, what he does, whatever it is, I'm confident he'll do it. It'll give you max effort. And I think he'll rub off in some ways on Anthony Davis to make Anthony Davis maybe work harder and be more serious. Maybe he'll be that, drill sergeant for him. I mean, maybe Anthony Davis doesn't pay attention to it. I don't know. This is going to be complicated. This is not going to be an easy fit. Look, I'd love to say it's going to be a great fit. And again, my thing with Russell Westbrook is I don't hate him as a player. I enjoy watching him. Damn, he's so entertaining to watch, but he's also very frustrating to watch, because if he had just honed his skills a little bit, I mean, he would have been more than what he's been so far in his career. And he's been an all-time great, but he would have been even better.
Yeah, I mean, I've always liked him more than you.
More than me, yeah.
I just love the effort, but yeah, he is, like I think you describe him as like a whirling dervish too,
right.
And he's all over the place, which I like. It's not, I don't care about the aesthetically pleasing stuff so much. I will say this.
Yeah, I do. That's why LeBron,
I know you do.
Durant, I love those guys. Like Giannis is a tough like for me, because I what have I said about Giannis? He's like a giant version of Westbrook. Like
Yeah,
he's this big athletic guy who just plays his ass off. I don't know
it's
if
just more
he's
efficient.
more efficient because he's starting to learn too. Like, I'm not a 3-point shooter,
No,
and
Westbrook's
actually,
not efficient. That's his
oh
biggest detriment. He's not an
no,
efficient
no,
player.
he keeps chucking them up. Jet, his what's the efficient field goal percentage?
Yeah,
A
per.
stat?
Oh, it's
No,
true.
not per.
Are you saying it's
True,
true
true,
shooting
true shooting.
percentage?
He's never had a year over 50%.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's
That-
ridiculous. I mean, when you see LeBron's had years over 60%, Durant as well. So that he's just not efficient. Whereas Giannis is way more efficient. Neither one's really
uh,
good at the free throw line, but Giannis shoots close to 60% from the floor because he's figured out now as time's gone on. Look, I'm really
Dunk
not a
it.
3-point shooter. Just and he can. He's 6'11", whereas Westbrook 6'3".
Yeah. So I look at it this way. I don't think the trade makes much sense basketball wise. It's a weird
Right.
fit basketball wise. They are fortunate in that Westbrook's contract is such an albatross that the Wizards were like, just throw in a bunch of crap and we'll take it. So it's not like
Right.
the Lakers really gave up anything of value. Of those three guys they traded, Kuzma, KCP, and Harrell,
Ugh.
probably KCP is the most important, has proven to be the most important to them in the
Yeah.
past couple of years. But I mean, you can find, he's not a rare player. You can find a lot of KCPs.
He's a
I
3
mean,
and D guy, right?
no
Yeah, he
offense to
can.
him, but I mean, you
No,
can find those guys.
he's a 3 and
So,
D guy, which you can
so
find. You
I
hope.
guess Sap, the silver lining to it for you is even if it doesn't work out basketball wise, they didn't really give up anything significant of value. I mean, a little bit of depth, and to get a guy who is still an all-star caliber player. So there's that, and also the way I'm going to judge this whole move is what they do subsequently. If they decide, okay, we're going to now get a bunch of shooters. Now that's not such an easy task because shooters cost money and the Lakers have
Right.
no money left. Well, then it suddenly looks like an incredible move. But the Lakers really need to fill out this roster. We talked about this last year too, Sep. Harold did not work out filling in for the Dwight Howard
No.
role of last year, nor did Marc Gasol. Gasol is still on this team, but it's just going to continue to decline. So they need a big and they need shooting, and to fill out the bench. So as the roster is currently constituted, I don't think that they got that much better. If they fill out the roster with the pieces they need, then I think that you're talking about a really, really heavy favorite in the West. So
Yeah.
it's sort of, to me, what they do now subsequently. If this is the final product and they fill it out with just Jags, I'm not that impressed. If they fill it out with good pieces, then I think that they stand a very good chance to win the whole thing.
They have 5 players under contract right now, right? So you got Westbrook, LeBron, Anthony Davis. That's a good start. But, you have Gasol, who looked calcified last year.
Yep.
THT and Alex Caruso are restricted free agents, so maybe you keep them, but they're role players. You hope to execute a sign and trade with Dennis Schroeder. Like if someone's interested in him and you can get something back in return for him, I can't see them re-signing him. Could you picture Schroeder and Russell Westbrook
No,
in the
it's
same
no good.
backcourt? I mean, that
No
would be a
good.
fist fight 14 seconds into the first game. So you're gonna have to make a move with Schroeder. And look,
But the thing
I
is,
didn't
we saw what you get back for a sign and trade in the NBA. You get some cap flexibility down the
you
road.
get
I mean,
60 cents on the dollar if you're lucky, right? So
right.
if you do that, I know they were somewhat interested in DeMar DeRozan, who's another guy that's not a real good 3-point shooter, but he's a good mid-range shooter. Are you just going to bring back people who are from LA because DeRozan's from Compton and Westbrook's from LA, and maybe Kawhi signs with the Lakers and they go $300 million over the salary cap. But I also think that, and I wasn't a big fan of them losing JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard last year. Those two guys
that
gave
ended up
them an
hurting
edge.
them. It did end up hurting them.
Instead of those two, they had who? Harold, who just didn't fit in in LA at the end with the Clippers either. So maybe just
Harold
getting out
and
of LA is good. Gasol, that's a downgrade because Howard brought them attitude, right? Like you can't have LeBron as the enforcer. Anthony Davis, we know, is not an enforcer. Westbrook's apt to be an enforcer, but he's 6'3". He's actually the guy who will get in people's faces, but you also don't want him getting ejected. With Dwight Howard, and maybe they can re-sign him. But the thing is about Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, they've won championships now, so that's not a selling point. Like, come to the Lakers and finish your career finally winning a championship. Well, Howard has 1 and McGee has 3. So is that a selling point? And there may be some series in the playoffs where they're not going to play. Will they like that? I would approach that or get someone like that, to fill out the big man position, because Anthony Davis does not want to play the five. He's much more comfortable at the four. They've talked about LeBron playing the four. He hates playing the four. He's always considered himself a three or a point guard. Look, he could play any position on the floor he damn wants because he's that versatile. But I think, yeah, they've got to fill out this roster. I mean, on paper, it's like there's a big three. Okay, that could really be exciting to watch, certainly interesting. But who else is going to be there? They need shooters because that's what you always need with LeBron, and certainly Westbrook is not that.
Yeah. Again, I think this is a trade that's sort of an incomplete. I think no matter what, the Lakers aren't. They didn't screw up here because they weren't trading anything that was that important.
Right.
But I'm also not going to go the whole other way, which is say, oh my God, they fleeced the Wizards. What a gangbusters trade for them. They're going to win the title now. Kendrick Perkins, our friend, was on First Take today saying it's over now. The Lakers are going to win the title. I just, it's not a complete enough team for me to see that between LeBron, the three stars they have, Anthony Davis is somehow the best 3-point shooter on the team now.
Oh yeah.
So,
you
make of that what you will. I don't know if that's a great situation.
Yeah. I mean, and LeBron's fallen in love with the three, and I get it. He's, evolved his game. He's a better 3-point shooter than he used to be. He's not going to the basket as much. Again, he's 36. He can still go to the basket. He also is frightened of the free throw line, which, again, that's my biggest mystery with my man. He's never been a great free throw shooter, but he always was around 75%, which you could live with that. There's no reason he's not an 80% free throw shooter. He can shoot. He's got right form. He's got better form than Magic Johnson had. Magic was an 85% free throw shooter. There's no way in hell LeBron should be shooting 69% from the free throw line. But now that he's got that in his head, or he's got the yips at the free throw line, he's not going to the basket as much. That's another thing I want to compliment Giannis on, is even though he struggled at the free throw line, he still went to the basket. And then we saw in the final game, 17 of 19 from the free throw line. That worked out really, really good. So as I've said before, free throw shooting percentage is important, but if you go a lot to the free throw line and make a lot of them, even if your percentage isn't as high as, say, the other teams, you could still beat them. I mean, there were games where Phoenix was shooting 88% from the free throw line, and Milwaukee beat them because they were just going to the free throw line that much more, get guys in foul trouble, and really kind of control the game with their physicality. So I want to see my guy going to the basket more. I think maybe he will. Maybe he'll be slashing more if Westbrook's handling the ball. But LeBron's going to have to adapt to Westbrook, because I can't see Westbrook adapting to anybody. He's probably the most rigid player in all of basketball.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. It's sort of an incomplete right now. The Lakers, really how they fill out the rest of their roster. Obviously, I don't think they can roll with Marc Gasol playing a big role in this team. As of right now, he's the starting center. That's just that's not tenable. They're going to have to rely on players wanting to, like you said, win a championship with them and sign for cheaper money if they want high talent, or they're going to have to be, shrewd with how they spend their money. They're not going to be in the mix for any of these top guys now. They're capped out. So they're going to have to find guys who maybe have, one skill set, and they say, okay, maybe you would have a little bit more money, but you can win a championship here, get a good shooter, get a good shot blocker, and then you talk from there. If they could get a guy like Bobby Portis, who played a big role on Milwaukee, okay, that would be great, but he's probably going to want a little bit more money because he's won a championship now. So that's not so easy. Danny Green's an unrestricted free agent. Do you bring him back, Sap? There's options, but again, a lot of you guys, like you said, have accomplished something. And so it's not so easy to just say, hey, come win a championship, when these guys now have won already. So you have to find the right player. You have to be able to evaluate what that player can do for you. Well, I don't think the Lakers front office has really shown that they're able to do that. Listen, it's great to say, hey, LeBron and Anthony Davis, we got those two guys. Well, anybody can evaluate those two guys. They're great players. Not very hard to say, hey, we put LeBron James and Anthony Davis together. It's going to be pretty good. I mean, really, anybody could tell you that. But it's where you fill out the rosters in between. And clearly last year, they said, oh, we could just pluck Howard and McGee. We can just replace them with Gasol and Harrell, and we can replace Rondo with Schroeder. And at the time, we said, yeah, okay, I think that will work. I think I said they had the best offseason of any team last year. Well, I was dead wrong. It didn't work because they didn't evaluate the fit properly. So
and the injuries, too. I still think if Anthony Davis had come to camp in shape and played like Anthony Davis normally did, and well, he's always injury prone, and if LeBron had stayed healthy, I think they still make the finals. As I think if Brooklyn was healthy, they would have made the finals. And
Yeah,
now at
but
least
Sap,
these
that's still
teams,
that covers
well,
up
no,
for the fact that
it
Harrell
does.
wasn't as good of a fit. It doesn't
Oh,
mean
he was
that
a
that's still
terrible
it
fit.
doesn't
Right.
suddenly change it into a good
No,
fit. It
no,
would have
I
been
think
because Anthony Davis and LeBron were covering up the
exactly.
poor
No,
fit.
that's a great point. And again, I think in a vacuum, Harrell, Gasol, and Schroeder look like upgrades over Howard, McGee, and Rondo. But fitting into that team, it wasn't, because those three guys that they let go, Dwight Howard, say what you want, is going to be a Hall of Famer without question. I mean, he's a bit
Yeah.
of a flake, whatever. Now he's a champion. Uh, we know that JaVale McGee is a versatile guy who has that championship DNA. I mean, he wasn't a huge contributor to winning 2 championships in Golden State, but he helped. I mean, he wasn't Kevin Durant or Steph Curry, but he was a damn good player and contributed what he had to do. I remember in the series against Cleveland, they had no answer for him. He outplayed Tristan Thompson in 2
Hell, he's on
finals.
Team USA, Sap. I mean, he must be
Why
something
not?
right.
Being asked if his mother is alive or not, which may have been the dumbest question ever. I mean, if you're a reporter and you can ask that question, I don't know. You can go to Google, check JaVale McGee, just go through his Wikipedia page, and you'll see that his mother is alive. She's a former Olympian. Why put that extra work in? Whatever. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Lakers do. It's going to be a fascinating offseason. We're coming up to free agency on the 2nd, which is Monday. So
which
we'll
is
have a
meaningless
podcast
in the
Monday.
NBA because they're already talking to these guys.
Oh,
so.
they're going to have guys signed, which is great. Yeah, because it starts at 6 p.m. So at like 6:01, someone's going to sign. It's like, wow, that was the quickest negotiation ever.
Yeah,
and
very quick.
That was quick. You want to come to play for us 4 years, 90 million. Okay, I'm in. So obviously Woj will be breaking things before it even happens.
Yeah, so we'll look forward to that, and the Lakers have a lot of work still ahead of them, though it's certainly an interesting and intriguing move, and we'll have you covered for all the latest in free agency and what it means for different teams. And we'll be here all off season, so make sure you keep checking us out. We'll also be giving you updates about the Olympics as the men and women for the USA continue to try to compete for gold. Sap mentioned Team USA men's not so good in the first game against France, and then really committed some serious war crimes against Iran in their second game, Sap, where they just bludgeoned poor Iran, had never stood a chance in that game.
I think Methuen High could have beat Iran. I mean, they're not a very good team.
So, that one was uncomfortable to watch at some point.
It was. It wasn't very good. And before you wrap up, just breaking news on my part. Not that I'm breaking the news, but I'm excited with the breaking news. In baseball,
I see
my favorite team, the San Francisco Giants, have acquired third baseman, shortstop, outfielder, versatile player, great player, and Chris Bryant, which could be a free agent at the end of the year. They needed another bat, so give my Giants credit for going out and getting him from the Cubs, who have sold off all their assets.
Torn things down to the nails and to the floorboards. Holy crap.
Wow.
They might sell the Ivy and Wrigley at this point. I mean, they have sold off everything.
Harry Carey's microphone might be for sale. Yeah, they're just selling off all their parts. Yeah, Baez is gone. He's going to the Mets. Bryant's going to the Giants. Kimbrel is with the White Sox. Across town, they sent him to the White Sox, and Rizzo to the Yankees. I wanted to see Rizzo on the Red Sox until they got Schwarber, who is a fun player to watch, but is injured, might not be back for a couple of weeks. But great trade deadline, because there's so many teams involved in this, and I know we don't talk much about baseball, and I am a San Francisco Giants fan, so I'm happy that Chris Bryant now a member of the G-Men.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting for them. I think Red Sox fans, like myself, were hoping for a little bit more than just Kyle Schwarber. Yeah. The team needed some pitching desperately and did not acquire any pitching. That's not usually doesn't bode well in the postseason when your pitching is horrible, which the Red Sox have basically somehow managed to come behind like 15 times to win games in spite of their pitching this year.
Right.
But so I think fans are a little upset that not enough. I mean, Schwarber is nice. They needed the first baseman too. He's played one game at first base in his career. So, I mean, they're kind of just sort of going to plug and play at first, and we'll see. Yeah, we don't talk much about baseball, but credit to the MLB for actually doing something exciting today and having a good trade deadline. That's certainly something that they need is more excitement and enthusiasm. But we expect many trades in the NBA to happen this offseason, so we'll have you covered for those too. Make sure you find the podcast wherever podcasts are found, the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. You can also check out our Twitters for our latest reactions to anything that happens in the sports world at John Sap 25. That's the number 2 and the number 5 at Jet Stryer. And we are also on YouTube, youtube.com/Jet Stryer. We will talk to you later in the week. And I hope everybody enjoys their weekend and stays tuned to all the latest in the NBA. And we'll be here for all the reaction. See you, everybody.